Welcome to the Church Explained podcast, a conversation to grow your leadership and build your church. Our goal in this podcast is to share inspirational insights and ideas to resource leaders, churches and teams. We have conversation with key team people from Icon Church and other invited guests. In this episode, we're going to talk about how the creative team or the worship team can help build the local church. My name's Dave.
My name's Nathan, and we are your hosts on the Church Explained podcast. And today, we are joined by Mr. Nathan Blood, and the crowd goes wild.
Woohoo!
Hi guys.
And
Welcome, mate.
Nathan, with his wife April, head up the Icon creative team. And you may have heard such music called Icon Music, which is incredible. But in this episode, we want to talk about the role of the creative team in building the church. So, Nathan, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah. Like you said, my wife and I, we lead the creative team. We're doing that a few years now, which is good fun. We did also work with the youth worship team, creative team before that as well, which was, that was a lot more fun, got to say.
Remember, this is being recorded. You know that's going out.
Yeah.
It's live now. We are live.
Yeah. Everybody prefers youth to church, though,
Once
right?
in youth, always in youth.
Well, that's it, right? There's a youth in all of us. So, but no, we both love music and creative production, all aspects of all that, and really love getting to songwrite and work with some incredible, musicians and creative production people, all that sort of thing. So it's great opportunity. And we also have two kids who we have a 2-year-old who is shaping up to be the best drummer in church already.
Yep.
Loves banging away with his sticks. And we also have a 1-month-old, which feels crazy to be able to say that already. It's flown by. So
That's amazing.
Hey, well, it's great to have you here, Nathan. We're going to talk about this idea of worship and creativity within the local church. And one of the things we've written down here is actually that it can have a real impact in the church because it takes up a lot of space in a service, doesn't it really? It's a major part in a service, the worship, the creative side. And for some churches, it's either a real springboard for growth, and some it can be a springboard for fallout as well. So we'll get into that in just a little while, but I want us to think around this idea. Does language really matter? I mean, we're using the phrase creative team. Yeah. Is the language important?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. It's something that we've thought about quite a lot, I'd say certainly recently over the last few years. We talk a lot in church about the fact that words have power, and that our language is a creative thing, right? You look at Genesis 1 and God spoke the universe, spoke creation into being. Yeah. We're made in his image, and so our words carry not quite the same power, but that same expression of being able to create with our words. And we like to say in our team, we're created to create.
I like that. That's good.
Which is something that I think we take that as that's who we are. That's built into the fabric of our team and our church. And so being creative, I think, means thinking about all the ways that we create in our lives, in our worlds, and language for me is a huge part of that. So like you said, things like talking about worship and creative, I think it's easy to sort of pigeonhole worship as like this one thing, one part of a service, or this 20 minutes where we sing some songs and then we get into the message or whatever else. And, I think biblically, theologically, the way that worship is talked about and expressed is much more holistic. It's our lives surrendered, dedicated to God. The Bible talks about us giving our whole lives as our act of worship. And so, we like to challenge people then on that and say, well, let's not think of it as the team that brings the worship. Let's think of it as the team that brings a creative expression of worship. We bring our creative gifts and use them together.
So just picking up on that a little bit, do you think then, has that been a shift over the last couple of years in the sense of, I'm trying to draw out a little bit of the sense of, you must have consciously thought, well, we're going to go from being a worship team to being a creative team.
Yeah.
And that decision in there, has it helped the team, do you think?
I would say I think it helps us to be more creative, I guess, to think more about what we do and the ways that we do it, and to not feel like, again, like worship has to be a specific thing or has to look a specific way. And I think, as I said, I think that words are powerful, have a lot of weight, and can influence the way we think, the way we feel, the way we act. And so for us, that was that's probably the biggest sort of shift that we try and, we tried to think about and to proactively do. But there's lots of little bits that just help with the team, the way that things function. Little bits of language where we say, well, is that really an accurate name for that? Is that the best way to talk about something? And I think all of those little things over time add up to help us as a team feel more on track, I guess. More like we're doing what we're called to do, more like we're doing what God's asking of us.
Does it help bring people in? I'm thinking like new people, never been to church, like, worship, it's not really a language they would use in their everyday, but creative, being creative would be. But then also, like a worship team is not just made up of singers and musicians. You've got people in the background, making sure the words are right on the screen, sound, lighting. There's this whole big thing which we might call production, but it's kind of bringing that. Do you think, I'm thinking twofold, do you think that language helps people connect with it better?
Yeah, I guess it's about the expression of what we do and making that accessible to people, right? So we're looking at everything we do, and we are thinking. I mean, it's a big thing for us, is thinking about the way we talk and the songs we sing and all of that. How is that perceived by people who don't go to church, or who don't know what church is like in our context?
I mean, we'll pick that up in a moment or two. It's a great thought that. So let's say there's some leaders watching this podcast today. They're thinking about the worship team in their setting. Do you think it would help them to maybe change the language from going from a worship team to being a creative team? Do you think it brings something more holistic to them, is one of the words you used there?
Yeah, I think it can do, but I think it's, anything like this has got to be authentic, right? You're coming from your
setting,
own setting, your own perspective, and that this for us was probably a bit of a journey. I think for me personally, as a leader of the creative team, I went on that journey first of thinking about worship and creative and all these different things, and so then for me, I was then bringing, my wife and I, we were bringing the team together on this journey. For anybody who's out there thinking about these things, or if this has sparked some thoughts, I think you've got to get that set in your own mind first. You've got to take that journey and find out what that expression is for you. What's the best way to think about it? Because creative is the word we landed on, but I'm not saying that's the perfect expression.
It's only a word you can use.
It works for us. There's only so many, but there are probably lots of different ways this could look. This is us. This is where we've landed. This is this is who we are. I think that journey is always a really good one to take, and to be thinking about those things is never a bad thing. It might end up in different places. You might land on something different, but it's a good thing to do, I would say, as a leader.
No, that's great. It's great just to take that journey. So let's think specifically about like sung worship and this moment in a service. There's lots of songs out there. And lots of even Spotify playlists now that are out there. So how do you know what songs to choose?
With great difficulty. This is probably one of the hardest bits of our job, I would say, is choosing songs for the church. Because I mean, the way that it works for us is that what myself and April, what we choose are songs that are going to be sung in all of our campuses, right? That's a big responsibility. So, we're trying to make sure we choose well. And there's lots of things lots of filters that we take things through. I think one of the biggest immediate things is style. It's very difficult, I think, we have worked on what our style is, what our our vibe, I guess you might call it, like what the feel is that we have through our song worship, as you say, and so there's lots of songs out there that you listen to and sort of immediately think, well, that's not, if we were to play that on a Sunday morning, it would feel so at odds with everything else we do. It could be disjarring. So that's probably the first most obvious thing that that comes up. That's not to say that you couldn't take that song if the song itself is amazing. You can obviously take that, reshape it, reform it. If the song's good enough. But
so just thinking of that, one filter's style, but there's got to be more filters that as you sit down with the team to choose a song or whatever's out there, what are the other filters and other filters that may help other leaders as well who are watching this? Because you've got to have some filters, don't you? Can't be just, that's the song I like. Although you've got to like it, there's got to be something there.
Yeah.
But it's got to be more than that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've done some songs over the years that I didn't like, but they were still good songs. So I can think of a couple of examples, but I won't shout them out.
Don't say them.
Yeah, I think like that musical style is one thing, but lyrical style is as much a part of it, particularly because these are songs that we are meant to be sung. This is a congregational activity, right? So that you're putting these words into people's mouths almost. So, thinking about the style, thinking about theology first and foremost, right, is making sure that we listen to this song, we don't think, wait, what are they trying to say there? What bit of theology have they perhaps missed, or interpretation's a big thing, right? So as someone who's been in church for say 10 years, like I can hear a phrase and it means one thing to me, but if a new person walks in and hears what does it mean to them? What theology does that teach them, and is that the right thing to be teaching them or to be showing them? So we've had a lot of thoughts about that recently. There's lots of phrases I think that can be very Christianese, things that, again, if you've been around church a bit, you hear them and you think, oh, I know what that means. If I was to talk about the blood of the lamb, like I understand what that means, you guys understand what I'm talking about, but if I walk in and I've never heard about Jesus or church before and they start singing about the blood of the lamb, thinking, what have I walked into? What sort of cult is this that I've stumbled across?
When's the lamb coming out to be sacrificed?
Or you're thinking about kebabs.
To be fair, actually, I maybe won't mind that.
On the video behind is just this kebab spit roasting around behind the lyrics.
But that is potentially one of the biggest things that we look for, actually, is that clarity of message, clarity of lyrical content.
So theology is important.
Yeah, and specifically for new people.
Okay.
Clarity of, and again, style, but clarity of the message of the song. What is this saying, and how accessible is it? That's huge, right? And probably one of the biggest things that we think about. And then past that, it's it kind of comes down to vibe. It comes down to, does this feel like it would fit? Some songs, maybe there's been aspects of those things that we think they're not quite there, but it just feels so right that you can't not do it. This is a spiritual endeavor. These songs are spiritual songs. They're Holy Spirit connections, and so sometimes that's there in such a present and obvious way that you're like, well, we could change those couple of words. We'll tweak that because the song itself is like resonates in that way that you think we just got to do it. So,
do you think there are you talked about there are songs that we may have done that you've not been the biggest fan of, but also. Are there songs that you're a big fan of but wouldn't work actually in our setting or in a congregation setting?
Yeah, absolutely. There's loads of songs that I would listen to on repeat, and think, like for me, worshipping at home myself, spending time with God, I'd listen to those over and over again. When it comes to our congregations, our churches as Icon, our campuses, do I want that? There must be something about that then that I'm thinking, although that's great for me, it doesn't necessarily translate as well to other people, So that there is that distinction. There's so many great songs out there that churches are doing all over the world that we've just said, for these reasons, it's just not quite right for us. And And that's not to say the song's not great. It's not to say other churches aren't using it amazingly, It's just...
Could be an amazing song. I mean, a couple of things I'd written down here was, thinking of filters, was to do with the vision and the culture and the values of the church. Does that play any part as you're choosing a song, as your team are getting ready, you're thinking of the song you're going to bring to the church, or even you're writing a song, not just you're bringing other people's songs? How much are you thinking about that, really?
Yeah.
Not that your job's on the line, by the way, but let's ask the question because I think it is an important one.
No, definitely. And I think this is something that probably, certainly is in our thinking, but actually is probably more of a, it's been absorbed into everything that we do because our team, our creative team in all of its different roles comes under that vision of the church first and foremost, and I think we'll probably talk about this a bit more later, but everything we do is so much a part of who we are as a church that every song we choose has already sort of gone through that filter of does it fit with our vision, does it, so I guess in a more obvious way, in a more practical way, it feels like there are seasons, for us as a church, and for every church, we go through seasons. We've been through a big season at the minute,
Did every church go through the blessing season?
Oh, I mean, if you didn't, I don't know if you were asleep for the last 12 months, there's definitely aspects of, we think we know we're in a season. We've got a specific vision for the year, different things, and so there might be songs that play into that, and we think, this is a great song for this time. But everything is always going through that filter of who are we, for us, who are we as Icon? Yeah. For anybody listening, who are you as a church? What's your identity? And so everything you do, every song you choose should always, I think, be coming through that.
So I mean, one of the reasons I'm drawing that out is because obviously when I chat with different leaders and, different churches, there's some churches out there who won't work that way. So it's almost like the creative stroke worship team will almost be separate from what's happening in the rest of the church. And of course that's an unhealthy mix, but there could be some people watching, they've got a great worship team, but actually it doesn't really connect with the rest of what's happening in the church, you know what I mean? So I think it's just good to spell that out a little bit about the fact that you need those filters. One of the things you're saying is, Nathan, that the team are so connected to the vision, it's almost like second nature. Yeah, but I think for some churches maybe listening today or watching, maybe they're not quite at that part of the journey. So it's good to try and think, well, how do they get to that part where they're so imbibing the vision of the church?
Yeah, and I guess the key or the challenge for us as leaders then, so for myself and my wife as creative pastors, or for anybody listening who is in that role, the key challenge for us is to always submit ourselves to that vision.
Great.
Brilliant.
Like I can't lead our creative team into that place of health and unity with the rest of the church, and that that all being right. I can't do that if I'm not first and foremost totally submitted to that vision, to that the calling that God's placed on us as a church, and so that the relationship between the creative pastors and the lead pastors, senior pastors, whatever, like that's key
it's gotta
in
be tight,
this.
it's
really? Well, I mean, you got to get on. You got to, and again, you got to submit because that's. I'm here leading this team. God's put me here, but he's also put a senior pastor there to lead the church. My role is to make sure that I'm always listening, always being guided by them, so that when I lead the creative team, it's it's almost as if the senior pastor is doing it. Like you want that flow of information, that flow of culture, that flow of vision to be seamless, right?
Yeah. No, really good, and they're just some incredible ways that the creative team can build the church, and being focused towards that. Let's go a little bit deeper. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced as being creative pastor?
I mean, the creative team is in an interesting position, a very specific position of a lot of the people in it are being put in a spotlight, right? There is an element of in any in most churches that have a similar style to us, there's an element of a stage and an element of you're putting people on that. So it's easy. It's easy for the divas to come out the woodwork, I guess, if I can be candid.
You be that. You're on the Church Screen podcast. You can be as candid as you wish.
But I'm saying that in the most loving way, because we're all flawed and we're all, we're all
divas in some part.
Well, if you're a creative, I think you probably are a diva, at least a little bit.
That's the only reason we're doing the podcast. Go ahead.
So that's, there's a challenge there of actually, as we've talked about, submitting to a vision and submitting to what we're doing and what we're building. Like, there's definitely challenges there associated with people can come in with the most incredible gifts, the most incredible musical or technical ability, but first and foremost, those people, we have to learn to be part of the team. That actually no one person is any more or less important when it comes to the team as a whole, the creative team. And so it's all about those people finding their roles, finding their parts to play, so to speak. And one of the difficulties there is that sometimes I guess that can be a difficult thing for people. It can be a difficult thing to be told, well, yeah, you might be able to play in this incredible way, but what we need you to do, what the team needs, is for you to bring that down and do it in this context. You might be able to put together these incredible flashy transitions with the lights and do the most amazing strobe show and all that, but what you need to do to build the team, to build the church, what you need to do as part of this collective, this thing that we're all doing, is rein that in.
So let me just draw that out a little bit, because it's a great question. I know we're putting you on the spot, but I think it will help people as they're listening. So for you then, or April, as creative pastors, how would you do that? How would you have that tricky conversation with a team member? What would you do?
So for us, there's always a progression for people to be able to serve on team on a Sunday or a Friday, or in whatever context. There's always a progression for people in that they, we run team nights every other week. That's like a rehearsal space, and so that we expect to see people there and getting plugged in. We want to see them sort of gelling well with the rest of the team, because if somebody comes in and feels sort of disruptive or isn't quite connecting, then there's obviously some sort of heart issue there. There's some sort of character thing. Character's massive, isn't it? So that's something that we focus on a lot. Is you got to see past the gifting to the person behind that, and I guess tackle that first probably, because for somebody to come into that position of serving on team and being part of that family, we got to make sure that they, again, gel well with everybody else and connect with the central vision, the central idea of what it is we're trying to do. And so go into that route, I guess, of the person, their character, is a, it's a massive thing.
So it's a bit of a process then. So in other words, before people get to that point when they're on the platform, they've gone through a bit of a process, having a bit of a staging where you're able to see what they're like, not just in the sense of gifting and ability, but what's the heart like. I suppose that's what you're looking for. What are they being a team member, or are they being a solo person on there who just wants to do their own thing? I often think about this idea of difference between influence and fame, because sometimes people are looking for fame, but they will have influence when they're on the stage. That's the reality. They will have influence, but if they're looking for fame, then maybe in a church setting, that's the wrong place to be, isn't it?
And I think the beauty of having sort of a process like that is that you can you've got somebody who's been turning up to team nights, they're getting involved, they sort of know their stuff. You drop them on team as a one-off and just watch. Just see how what happens. How do they react? What do they do? Have they suddenly forgotten everything that we talked about and they're off doing their own thing, or have they really come under the like I say, the central vision?
Right. No, I love it, and I love because we've worked quite closely. Because obviously, you led the youth creative team for many years, and when I was a youth pastor, and that whole thing around character, it just reminded me that some of the best worship leaders or the best team players we've had have been those, definitely those of character. They might not have been the most gifted, but they were the best for us. And I think that's so key. And we say a phrase, the team I'm a part of is bigger than the part I play.
Yeah.
And
say that again for people.
The team I'm a part of is bigger than the part I play.
Yeah.
And so, like bringing them under the vision, under everything, I think, there's just so many great takeaways for people. But we're going to look at top 3 takeaways, and they're not your, Friday night takeaways.
We can do that after if you want.
We'll talk about that afterwards. But the 3 takeaways for building a healthy team that serves the church. Yeah.
So I mean, we've touched on this a little bit through what we've been saying, but the biggest thing probably for us is to submit to the vision, is to make sure that we as leaders are submitting to the vision of our pastor, of our church. What are we doing and who are we? And then making sure that what we do as a team builds that vision, is part of that vision, doesn't do anything to detract from that, but actually moves us towards that together. And then individually, on an individual level, trying to make sure that every person on the team understands that they are part of that vision, that their role is to serve that greater whole, to be part of that bigger picture. So submit to the vision is like the biggest thing that I could say.
That's the number one big thing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, definitely. And I think everything that we do, and we talked about the journeys we've been on with language and all these different things, they've all been part of us looking at the vision of Icon as a whole and thinking, what are we doing to help that move forward? What are we doing to help serve that? So, the second takeaway for me is choose or value people over tasks.
Great.
Value people over what they do, what they bring. Because, I mean, as we talked about, people can come with all sorts of baggage or all sorts of ideas of grandeur and fame and these different things, or people might come with the lowest self-esteem, and and you've got to draw them out their cell. People can come in all sorts of places, but the church is people, right? It's not what we do on a Sunday. We're putting together a service and we're trying to create these moments and these atmospheres of worship, but first and foremost it's bringing people together in unity and community to worship God together. And that worship, as we said, isn't limited to the songs that we sing. It's all of our lives together. And so for me, making sure that I as a leader am focused on the people that make up the team rather than the roles that they do, rather than the things that they do week in, week out. That actually my focus is on, are they growing as a person? Are they walking further in their relationship with Jesus? Are they being discipled? Is that happening? Because we want them to grow in their skill. We want them to grow in their technical ability, but first and foremost we want them to draw closer and closer to Jesus. And be led in that way before any of the other stuff happens. Yeah,
I love that.
And then the third takeaway, and again, this has been a massive thing for us, is consistency is key.
Brilliant.
And consistency is the number one thing almost. For me as a leader, that I am a consistent leader, that I bring consistency to the table in my interactions with my team, in what I do, that people know they can rely on me, and that they can rely on what we do as pastors, week in, week out, that we're consistent in that. Consistent then in what the team does as a whole and the structure of that. So, if you're going to have rehearsals, have them every 2 weeks, and commit to that. If you're going to do a sound check and you're going to keep it to half an hour, then keep it to half an hour and do it every week. It's things like that where it's people, know and understand that that's what we do and that's who we are, and that consistency I think is vital. And then past that consistency in our expression of worship every time we gather.
Yeah.
Because again, like talked about earlier, style and lyrics, theology, all these things come into play, but we want to make sure that week in, week out, we deliver a consistent experience that if a new person turns up one week and thinks, wow, that I've never experienced anything like that, they turn up the next week and think, yeah, that's exactly what it was like last week as well. It's that they get that same experience, that they get that consistency. Because for me, that's what when we've got that consistency, and it's a strong consistency that we bring, that's what leads people on that journey then of getting involved, of sticking around, of building and becoming part of what we do.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously those 3 takeaways, great takeaways for people, I think, and you've done an amazing job, obviously, at Icon Church. You guys have built the team and been involved in that, written your own songs. We'll maybe come back to that in another podcast, just to discuss about songwriting and that's sort of stuff as well. Sort of final question, how do you think churches under 75, how can they create an amazing worship team or creative team? Because obviously Icon Church is a little bit bigger than 75, the main campus. So you've got quite a lot of resources there. What can other church leaders do? Maybe they're looking in and they're thinking, well, I don't have a big team. What can I do? So what advice would you give them?
I think first and foremost is build with what you have. Like look at what's in your hands and use that. Take advantage of what's there. Use the people that are around and are willing and are involved. Like we talked about, find people who are all in with the vision and just find the bit of something that they might be able to do. And grow them in that. It's easy to look at churches that are, feel like they're so far ahead, feel like they're way down the line, and think, well, if only we had that, or if only we could do X, Y, Z. But where you're at, you have tools available to you. There are people there who are ready and willing to serve. Or if you come into this and you're listening and you're thinking, well, that's great, but there is literally no one, then you've got a computer, you've got the internet, you can go out there and find some great expressions of worship, and bring those into your service and say, well, if we haven't got a team, then at least we've got this. Give people a vision of what it is we want to build, and then start saying, right, so now how do we start to move towards this? You got to take what's in your hands, because that's what we've done every step of the way. I think is just looked at what we've got and thought, all right, what are we going to do with this then? How are we going to use this to its full potential? But within that, always create opportunities for growth as well. Because you can say, well, we take what we've got and we'll use it, but then you got to have that sort of, I would say, tread the line between being content and discontent. You want to be happy with where you're at, but you want to always be looking to get that little bit further.
What's the next steps, really?
And so creating opportunities for growth, I think, within whatever you do. If you're saying, well, all we've got is 2 instrumentalists and a vocalist, that's great. Build with that. Do the best you can with that, and then make sure there's an opportunity for that other instrumentalist to come in and say, right, so how are they going to add to the team? Or how are we going to bring somebody else in and grow that? Because it's always, we always want to be moving forward, moving things along, trying to do something new, trying to create something fresh, right? And then I guess we've again alluded to this, but we've spent a lot of time over years thinking about our style, thinking about our vibe, thinking about what we bring to the table, and who we are as a church. And I think that's really important, is sort of finding your niche. It's very easy again to look at these massive churches in America and Australia and think, well, they've got it nailed, so maybe we've got to be like that. But actually, there's a unique expression in every church, I'd say, a unique expression of the presence of God and of what God has called his people to be. And so there's a niche for you but it's got to be an authentic thing, right? You know, you're trying to find who you are, not who you're emulating or who you're trying to be.
Yeah.
That's a difficult thing to do, and it's not, you know, it's not a quick thing. It's not an easy journey, but I think again it comes down to looking at what you've got, who's around, and who you are, and the vision of the church. Who are you trying to reach? What are you trying to accomplish? All of those things then come together to, I think, dictate then what is this going to look like? What is this going to feel like? And committing to that, finding consistency in that, I think is super important. Because whatever it looks like, whether it's a full band or it's a couple of people, that being consistent week in, week out, that being reliable, people turning up and knowing that that's what it's going to be like, and knowing that it's going to be that, you know, that there's that consistency there, that again to me is key and will help you build, because there'll be strength there, and when you add things to it, it will grow rather than detract. You know, you'll be focused on that forward movement rather than getting distracted by all the different things you could be doing. And I guess if I was going to say one last thing, I'd just say keep it simple.
Yeah.
Like, particularly if you feel like you're a small church or you don't feel like you've got a lot of resource, just focus on the key things, the things that are important to you. And again, consistent week to week. The easiest way to achieve that is to simplify it down and not try and do too many things.
And don't make excuses that you're making it simple. Like, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, again, that authenticity that shines through that will attract people, will draw people in, and will make it something. You'll create something that people want to be a part of by keeping it authentic and keeping it consistent and just keeping it simple.
Brilliant. Nathan?
Well, it's so good.
Yeah.
So good. And that's it. That's all we've got time for. I'm sure we'll be jumping into another creative worship, songwriting.
I think let people know about the creative resources that are available.
Yeah. So if you go to icon.church/open, we have lots of creative resources that'll help you in building teams, building, you know, practical things, and even tracks for some of our songs that are on there that we've written at Icon Church. Also want to encourage you to check out Icon Music on wherever you consume your music. But it's been great to be together. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Big love to April.
Cheers.
And all the million kids.
Nova and Roman. And Roman will be on drums when he's 4 years old. But that's it for this episode. It's been so good to share around the whole thing of creative team building the church. And just want to say thank you for listening. Remember to rate, review, subscribe wherever you're consuming this content. Drop us a message if you want any help with anything. Drop us a comment if you have any questions. We'd love to hear from you. And let me just remind you again, icon.church/open. Go on there. There are free resources, not just around creative, but around many areas in church. Well, that's been it for today's episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Church Explained podcast.